I'm gonna try to do like my stream in a mask because it was just a fun little thing. I was kind of like it was just a weird idea that somebody tried to ask me to do, and seeing how that will work out. Surprisingly, is the funniest thing is like my face is like completely fogging up with my mask on right now. And if you guys want to like just chime in and say hi or whatever, feel free to do so. I'm also going to add some audio to my thing where you can actually see my, where you can actually hear another thing where I'm going to be listening to a podcast while I'm at it. I'm currently look, lis- I'm currently listening to the Drawn Story of Animation, which is by let's see, by I mean, How Stuff Work in Cartoon Network, just like a fun little podcast that they made. So I want to add that in there. And if you guys want to ask me any questions, so feel free to just like do so. And honestly, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this for long. You'll you'll be able to reveal the mystery man in the face. All right, let's get this started.
Are you with really the last of the dodos? Yes, I'm really the last of the dodos.
Hi, I'm Holly Fry, and this is Drawn, the story of animation. Now, if you listen to the first episode, we kind of gave you the breakdown of how an animated show gets made. But today, we're going to go back a little bit further in history. Even though animation is a relatively new art compared to, say, painting or sculpting, it still has a really rich history. And I wanted to talk about some of those early moments that you might not know about before characters like Mickey and
Actually,
Bugs
I
really
want to
ran the board
test
as
out one
the
little thing
famous
before
cartoon
I go any
characters.
further.
Now, just to set
I actually want to hear what it
expectations, this
sounds
is
like
definitely not
when I'm
what
on
I would
YouTube or
call a
something.
comprehensive history of early animation. That would take us months and possibly years to discuss. But I just want to hit on a couple of
Sounds
key
like
moments that really helped create the environment where those flagship characters could be created. Because even as early animators were figuring out how to use a series of frames to create a sense of movement, they were
Okay,
also
that
experimenting
actually
with
sounds pretty good.
storytelling and character and
Awesome.
how to
Now
capture
I
an
think I actually
audience's
kind of mastered this
attention
whole
and create
layout
that magic that
of
was so
everything.
much the focus of episode one. First of all, the thing that's worth knowing is that a lot of people in the animation industry love animation history. It's just part of the culture of it.
I think animation is, and partly why I love it so much, is when you get into it, you're joining this tradition. It's a guild.
That's Michael Oline, Chief Marketing Officer for Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, and Boomerang. If you're a fan of classic cartoons, you have probably tuned into Boomerang from time to time.
Jerry would rather use his charm to lure a feline foe into his trap, but when necessary, he is quite handy with a short piece of pipe. Now, see more of your favorites, Tom and Jerry, on Boomerang from Cartoon Network. It's all coming back to you.
It's a little bit like shoemaking, like there's skills, like real practical skills that are handed down. So people today still, with the fanciest tools imaginable, still have Preston Blair's notes from 19 whatever 40 something from Disney, hand-drawn notes about how to make a rubber ball bounce or how to do a facial expression.
The ball and join in, everybody. For sunshine.
Preston Blair was an animator for Disney and MGM, and he started in the 1930s and he worked for decades. He created iconic pieces like the Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey Mouse and the Hippo and Alligator segments for Fantasia. And he worked long enough that he even was part of the Flintstones later on in his career.
And that stuff is passed, it's like sourdough. Like there has to be a starting yeast or whatever that is. And people pass the knowledge down. So it's a tradition. Everyone in it is interested in it.
But before it became part of a trade tradition,
Okay, I
early
get where,
animation in many ways
okay,
informed
too distracting.
all of early cinema.
Okay, here's my soapbox spiel. The reason why animation is so essential, really to understanding cinema, is animation predates cinema.
That's Eddie Von Mueller. He is an animation historian and a professor at Emory University.
There are two ways of making moving pictures. There's the way of making movie pictures that most of us are familiar with, which is I point a camera at an event that's happening in the real world, and I make a fragmentary recording of it, right? The camera breaks time into 24 chunks a second, and then I can string it back together, and I can replay an event. Now, that kind of motion picture is born in the late 19th century, but it's born later than animation. So the principle of animation, which does something very different, instead of reconstructing or recording time, what animation does is it creates time. It creates motion and event and action that never happened in the real world. And it's the original cinema. So what's fascinating to me is how this mechanism, the mechanism of animation, which predates recorded cinema, how it so quickly became eclipsed by recorded cinema and kind of shoved to the sides. The genesis of animation and the genesis of newspaper cartoons is simultaneous. The labor force that makes animation
Oh shoot, I
possible
forgot my phone.
is going to come from
Give me 1
a
second. I'll be right back.
generation or two of young.
Hey guys, I'm back. Sorry to keep you waiting, and just want to kind of get started back on illustrating and all that stuff. Doing a little bit of comic book pages, and but feel free to just like chime in and say hi. I'm actually on Instagram as well, which I'll be making a little announcement in there, or probably add a little bar at the bottom, just like to show that I'm on Instagram and all that other fun stuff. I wonder if there's anyone actually answered my question today. That's a bummer. Nobody seems to really want to put in anything right now. That's a shame. Oh well, maybe next time I'll ask some questions to see what's up. Yeah, well, kind of like a little disappointment when you don't really see anyone actually like throwing any questions out that your way and everything like that. Hold on a second. You little shit. Don't have a comfort spot anymore there. Sorry, cats are being a little. One of my cats is being a little shit. All right, let's get back to the audio and just you know, have some fun with this.
To draw cartoons quickly was a viable road to an income. And the opposite is true now. Now, if you want to starve, be a cartoonist.
For the poor.
One of those early lucrative cartoons was called The Yellow Kid, and that was a comic strip that ran primarily in the 1890s. And it became so popular that William Randolph Hearst hired its creator, Richard F. Outcole, away from his job at New York World and gave him a lot more money to run that strip in Hearst's New York Journal American. The Yellow Kid also had an incredibly successful series of merchandise tie-ins and showed the world that comics could be lucrative, although it's still a little unclear whether Outcole made much off of those merchandising deals. There's also a little bit of irony in there because the Yellow Kid, who was basically this little kid in a yellow ensemble, pretty simple, was originally written and drawn as a little bit of a takedown of capitalism. But even though animation has diversified to include a wide range of artistic styles, you can still see that print comics root in modern day shows like The Simpsons or Rick and Morty.
So print cartooning is going to provide us with our labor force. It's also going to provide us with our aesthetic, right? You've got kind of these simplified, mostly line drawings. So animation is not just drawn animation. There's a lot of other kinds of animation. But the reason why in the early years, so this is late 1800s, early part of the 20th century, one of the reasons why animation becomes what we all think of now, right? Because if you think about, I don't know, what the kids watch these days, Rick and Morty, Family Guy, they look like print cartoons, right? It's a version of drawn animation. So it's the late 19th century vogue for cartooning that gives us that aesthetic and industrial base.
One of the key steps in bringing drawings to life was actually getting them to appear as though they were moving. And the man who is sometimes called the father of American animation, James Stewart Blackton, was one of the earliest experimenters in animation technique.
So our first films that feature what we think of as animation come up right at the turn of the century. There's this guy named J. Stewart Blackton. And Blackton is a newspaper cartoonist. Blackton is an early film pioneer.
There's actually a little bit of fate to Blackton's story and how his film career began. He was on assignment as a journalist artist when he was sent to interview Thomas Edison and have a look at Edison's Vitascope, which was one of the first film projectors.
I think he
And
probably
Blackton
stole
was
that.
excited by this new medium of motion pictures. He ended up making several live-action films as a recurring character called the Happy Hooligan, and he did those films first with Edison and then with American Mutoscope and Biograph Company, which was founded by an inventor from Edison's lab named William Kennedy Dixon. Blackton also purchased a Vitascope from Edison, and he started his own production company, the American Vitagraph Company. And it was there that he really started experimenting with animation, and one of the most important results was a short film called Humorous Phases of Funny Faces, which combined live action and animation as the animator's hand is seen drawing people that then come to life. My favorite part is a clown that gets half erased, but he keeps trying to do his tricks. But before all of this, Blackton's career as a performer actually had its roots in vaudeville, where he would do what he called lightning sketches to amaze the crowd.
He is also associated with vaudeville. And vaudeville's crucially important, especially when we get up to guys like Bugs Bunny. So vaudeville is this immensely popular American cultural form. And there were these guys who did their act in vaudeville, and what they were quick draw artists. They did what are called chalk talk acts, or they called themselves lightning sketchers. And so their act was they'd have like an easel or a chalkboard, and they would sort of tell stories and draw cartoons while they were telling the story and make the drawing evolve. And the stories were usually either racist or sexist because funny and vaudeville. Blackton had this successful chalk talk act, and in 1900, Blackton goes to Thomas Edison's studio, and they do a film called The Enchanted Drawing. The Enchanted Drawing is not what we would think of as sort of full animation, but what The Enchanted Drawing is going to do is introduce a couple of ideas that become central to animation. We don't have characters, because this is kind of a vaudeville act. The idea is I'm going to use stuff I can do with the movie camera to facilitate stuff I can't do on the vaudeville stage and create like enhanced vaudeville. So the Enchanted Drawing in 1900, though, what makes me think of it as really kind of the first American animation is it establishes that animation is drawing, that animation has this kind of vaudeville aesthetic, and that animation is magic. The idea that animation is a form of magic is part of the DNA of American entertainment in the animated form. What's great about animation is because it's not recorded. It's not setting up a camera and making people act things out. I'm not limited by physics. I'm not limited by logic. I'm not limited by all of the tawdry things that make real life dull. I can kind of open it to wonder and enchantment.
Next, I want to touch on Max Fleischer. Fleischer is a name that comes up right alongside Walt Disney's when people talk about animation in the early 20th century. Because he was that prolific. Betty Boop is his creation, and she was often joined on screen by other characters, including Popeye the Sailor Man and another Fleischer creation, Coco the Clown. And one of the techniques invented by Fleischer that's still used today is rotoscoping. And this allows the motion of a live human or animal to be traced over frame by frame so that when you run those frames together, you create smooth, natural movement in animated characters. Rebecca Sugar, the creator of Steven Universe, is a big fan of early animation, and she describes a time that Fleischer used this technique to great effect.
Folks, I'm going down to St. James Infirmary.
One of my favorite cartoons of all time is the Betty Boop version of Snow White, which has this incredible sequence where Coco the Clown turns into this strange ghost that's rotoscoped to... Cab Calloway's dancing is rotoscoped for this ghost, but he doesn't look like a person. He doesn't have a torso. He's just like legs and arms and a head, but he's moving like a person. And he's singing St. James Infirmary. And it's just great. It's so cool. The first time I saw it, I just fell in love with that sequence.
Now when I die, they mean my straight leg breeches. Put on a box back coat and a Stetson hat.
And of course, Coco the Clown, which Max Fleischer combined live action and animation and early pioneering work in that regard.
That's animation historian Jerry Beck. He's also a producer and a professor at Cal Arts in Los Angeles.
And those cartoons are still funny and still classic today. So if you somehow see any cartoons that are labeled Out of the Inkwell or Coco the Clown, Max Fleischer, check them out.
I talked with Jerry to find out even more about the cartoons that were delighting audiences in the early days of American animation. Jerry has worked for Nickelodeon and Disney. He's also written more than 15 books on animation history. He shared with us a quick list of cartoons that were popular well before Mickey Mouse hit the scene in the 1920s.
So when Mickey became a star, he took the mantle away from Felix the Cat. Felix the Cat was kind of the big cartoon star of the 1920s, the silent era. Drawn by the wonderful Otto Mesmer was the artist behind that. Really, really great character animation, early, use of that. I mean, back in those days, just moving the characters, a pen and ink character was thrilling enough for an audience. So to actually have them emote in any way was a little bonus extra back in the 20s. Other great characters from the 1920s, what Disney was doing. He was not famous yet. He was still an underdog guy, but he did these Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoons, and those were really a precursor to the Mickey Mouse cartoons. And before that, he also combined live action and animation. He was inspired by Max Fleischer. Max had Coco the Clown come out of the inkwell and be a cartoon character in the live action real world. So Disney flipped it and had his live action little girl go into the cartoon world.
That live-action little girl that Jerry mentioned was a character named Alice. The Alice comedies, as they were known, featured a little girl named Alice, not the Lewis Carroll character, although there are some similarities. And Alice entered animated worlds and interacted with the characters there. The first Alice short was made in Kansas City, Missouri in 1923, when Walt and his longtime collaborator Ub Iwerks were at the Laugh-O-Gram Studios. And that studio went bankrupt not long after, but soon Walt was in Los Angeles and was able to start making the Alice comedy series. From 1923 to 1927, nearly 60 Alice comedies were made, and the lead character had been played by 4 different child actresses. So much of the innovation at this time involved humans interacting with drawings. But one such instance, a vaudeville act, is lauded by animation fans and people that work in the industry as the apex of that idea. Here's Rebecca Sugar.
There's this theme of magic in animation, which when you look at old animation from the 20s and 30s and 40s, I think that connection was more obvious because people still remembered when it was just a simple magic trick or a stage show. Some of the really earliest stuff from Winsor McCay, some of the first animation ever. Gertie the Dinosaur is one of the first animated films ever.
Winsor McCay.
It was part of a stage act where he would interact with the characters he had animated, and he would be throwing an apple, which would become like a pumpkin, which would be fed to this dinosaur. It's magic, it's all magic, which I think is really beautiful.
Gertie the Dinosaur was created, as Rebecca mentioned, by virtuoso animator Winsor McCay in 1913. And if you've ever been to Disney's Hollywood Studios and you have seen that giant dinosaur that's just sort of randomly there in the middle of the park, that is also an ice cream counter, that's a nod to Gertie. Once again, here's historian Eddie Von Mueller.
Animation, we love animation. Many people love animation because it's animation, because we have this idea that some crazy guy painstakingly drew all of this stuff. And McCay was that crazy guy. He did not use cells. Cells are sheets of translucent plastic that we use in animation to make life bearable. He redrew with slight incremental changes, thousands and thousands. He had one assistant. He did this with thousands of drawings. There are very few people ever to work in this business that could draw as fast, as clean, and as well as McCay. So one of the things that McCay understands with Gertie is that we're interested in how animation gets made. We're interested in animation kind of artwork, even if we don't think of animated films as art, and most people never have. But there is a kind of craftsmanship, a kind of material quality that we like. He also acknowledges in Gertie the Dinosaur that, like every other kind of cinema, animation is going to work best by providing us characters that we identify with. Early motion pictures didn't have stars. Actors were completely anonymous until 1912. We had very few close-ups. So usually all you could see of the person wasn't their face, it was their costume. Early cinema is not a cinema of personalities, right? Some people called it a cinema of attractions. It was just like a series of like cool novelties. But right around the same time that the rest of the world of movie making is turning to stars and performers and saying,
I think
the
this
audience wants
page
to
is pretty
identify
much done.
with these people. The audience wants to
Me,
like these
here,
people.
let me show you guys what
McKay does that.
What I have right now.
And so he has designed Gertie to be endearing. You've seen it, right? It's charming, right? So what animal does she remind you of?
She's like a dog.
She's exactly like a dog. She wags her tail.
So
she pants,
here's the first
she
half,
fetches. What
and here's the second
animal
half.
in the movies
So what I'm going to
is
be doing.
easier to make people love than a flippin' dog? We love dogs.
Then what I'm going to be doing is going to copy this and put it into this page.
Gertie utterly captivated audiences, and the genesis of McKay's choice to animate a dinosaur actually came, according to Jerry Beck, from the fact that people...
And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to actually be copying this page and pasting it on this page with the changed facial expression and continue on with here. I think page 10 is finally done. All right, so now on to the next page with very little time I have. Kind of jump in the next section of the book. Which is this one. Damn it. I'm already tired. Seriously, one of the things I hated most about like my schedule is I have very little time to actually just like, just get a full 8 hours just beating into this thing and make it into an awesome piece. And I'm just already working like, when I'm working my morning job, I'm working my night job. And I'm doing the remaining just to do this. And, I always think it'd be really cool to share with you guys and seeing what I do. Maybe give you an idea of like, what challenge does it take for an artist to become who he is, and show you any part of the life struggles that most people would go through if everyone wanted to commit to this kind of role. Animation, commission artwork, or anything like that. It's a lot of work to be a comic book artist, which not a lot of people seem to be willing to do in a struggle. I mean, some people have been able to hit that spot just perfectly where they could just like make a living out of it, which is very rare. I do this for I think of love it more than anything else. You know what? Yeah, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you very much, guys, for watching my stream. Hopefully you guys actually enjoy watching this stuff, and feel free to come back and chat and say hi and all that other good stuff. I hope you have a guys